What's happening? Um, so I had to get. I'm telling you, man. I don't know how many of you are having this kind of issue, but yeah, talking about dating today, right? It's kind of interesting out there. I'm getting back into it and doing my thing, and it's a trip. It's really a trip, you know. So I've not to toot my own horn or anything, right? But I've always had pretty good luck, right? Because I'm pretty outgoing, I'm friendly, I'm funny, and I like to joke around with people and just make people feel comfortable, really, you know what I mean? And I think usually works in my favor. So I've always been really good about that. And now with this Me Too movement, after my divorce and everything, it's just like I'm a little bit more cautious, you know what I mean? And now, I have a top secret security clearance, so I'm like, dude, I can't fuck up. You know what I mean? I really, the margin for error is extremely small. Okay. So that said, right, I'm very cautious in who, I go up to, or, who I talk to or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I don't just talk to anybody. Um, so that said, you know, it's interesting, and I know me, okay? I haven't been into dating for a long time. I just haven't been just into it. It's just been like, I'm kinda going through the motions, it's just, I don't really wanna do this kinda thing, and I know that comes out in the way I approach, right? I know that because 'cause I'm not as outgoing. I'm like, "Oh, shit, what if" you know I also have this stigma, right? Now that I'm 52 years old. In my 40s, it wasn't that bad. But now I'm 50, dude. Like 50. 50 was always old when I was younger, right? So like I know I don't look it, but I'm still aware of it, right? And I'm not hyper aware. I'm just cognizant of it, right? And it fucks with me a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, right? So anyway, make a long story short, um, I've gone up. So there was two women, right, that I went up to and I started talking to. One of them was a doctor, and it was you could just tell neither one of us was really into it, and that's fine, no big deal. She was a little harsh burgers anyway, you know what I mean? Like, and I wasn't super outgoing, so we both kind of fucked up in that realm. But the second woman I approached was the woman that the groomer for Einstein, right? And we went out on a date, and it was that one was funny, man, because it got to a point where she asked me, she goes, "Well, do you want kids?" And I said, "Nah." You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense for me anymore, and I think that's when the date was pretty much over. Um, and she could kind of tell that I wasn't 100% into it. I don't know if she was after that. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. It just wasn't. It was blah. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Maybe it was all over my face. I don't. I really don't know. I can't tell you, man. Right? It is what it is. So those were my two incidences where it was like, I wasn't really ready. It was really close to when I got out of my relationship, all that kind of stuff. So it was still fresh, right? And then recently, I've been going out and just kind of hanging out, just been doing my thing, right? And I hooked up with this, I'm somewhat dating a yoga instructor right now. She's cool. We have a good time together and stuff. But I'm trying to get out there still too, you know what I mean? And having different options or whatever, just to see what's out there. You know what I mean? I don't know. And so I approached a girl yesterday, right? At First Watch. She was a waitress. She was not my waitress, but a waitress there. And she was very cute, man. You know what I mean? I have this thing about like women with glasses. Um, they got that intellectual look, you know what I mean? And then she was very organic. And what I mean by that, she didn't have like any tattoos or anything like that. You know what I mean? She was young. I was thinking maybe around 30, which is kind of okay, but that's where around 30 is where they kind of get the babies rabies and that sort of thing, where they're wanting to have kids and wanting to have relationships and that sort of thing. And I went up to her and I just said I had to come meet you, you know what I mean? And she was really, really, really nice. I got to admit that. So I'll give her that, right? But then I said, do you have a boyfriend? She goes, yeah. And I said, "Ooh, how long have you had that problem?" You know? And, she said, "9 years. We were high school sweethearts, and we're still together." I said, "Oh, well, I guess that's good," you know? Um, but I'm thinking to myself, immediately, I was gonna talk shit, right? You know what I mean? And not be mean about it, but I'm like, "Well, if he hasn't asked you by now, something's not right," right? So I didn't say anything. Um But, I've asked out a couple other women and, right away they say they have a boyfriend and this and that. And that's fine, you know what I mean? No big deal. You know, but what struck me about this one in particular was that she was with this dude for 9 years, right? And they were high school sweethearts. And, you know, I've been around friends with a lot, that were high school sweethearts and that sort of thing. And they, waited 10 years to get married, got married, and then they're divorced in two. Or they just went their separate ways after, years and years after high school. Um, and she was still holding on to hope. She said, yeah, I hope, she was like this. I hope, he asked me to marry him and this and that. And I'm like, fuck, good luck with that, man. You're fighting against the statistics at that point. You really are. I mean, high school sweethearts don't usually last, unfortunately. I'm not wishing anything bad on her situation by any means, but it just made me question, like, what the fuck are they thinking? What are these people thinking? You know what I mean? Like, dude, you know what I mean? Like, you're in your 20s. You should be going out there and exploring and trying to figure it out. I'm not saying go out with me, but I mean, go out with me and, you know what I mean, see what I'm about, see what the next guy's about, see what 10 other guys are about. You know what I mean? I'm not saying sleep with everybody. I'm not saying any of that stuff, right? But you're wasting away, right? Because if my calculations are correct and they're still, they were still together, it depends on when they got together in high school, being high school sweethearts. She's anywhere from, I would say, 25 to 27, right? Maybe around there. Unless they got together when she was a freshman, which I don't know, I doubt that. So I'm going to give, 24 to 27, let's say, right? Um, she's almost to 30, so she's going to be wanting to get married, right? And you know, there's so many variables that you kind of have to think about. Not kind of, but you do have to think about, right? If you're gonna get married, like the groomer, she was like, "Well, do you want kids?" And I was like, "No." You know what I mean? So there goes a fucking meal ticket. You know what I mean? Like, because she was a groomer. She loved it. She loved doing it. I ain't mad at her. You know what I mean? God bless anybody who loves their job. I I think, you know what I mean? But you gotta put it in perspective, right? If you're not making enough money to have a car payment, have a house payment, have a child on top of that, and have a family, then you might want to rethink the decisions you're making. You know what I mean? It's just you got to put it in perspective. If you want to wait tables or be a groomer, nothing wrong with that. But just understand you're not going to make enough money to buy a house or be in a family unless you meet a guy that, you know, makes Matchbox 20 money. You know what I mean? I mean, let's get real. My son probably makes, you know, a little under six figures, right? And he can't even afford a house. Um, you know what I mean? So I just don't understand what these kids are thinking right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I thought about that shit when I was young. I was like, oh man, if I'm gonna have a family, and it was a lot cheaper then, right? So I was thinking, okay, I want to make six figures. I mean, I want to get there. You know what I mean? Boom, 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 boom. And I did everything I could to get there. And I was like, okay, that's a comfortable living. You know what I mean? When I was graduating from college. So I was able to get there, right? That was my goal. And then I felt like I could sustain a family, I could sustain, whatever came up, whatever life threw at me, kind of thing, right? I had margin, you know, and I just don't understand why my boys think like that, but you know, these other people out there, you know what I mean, like that girl, like unless the dude's gonna make some serious bank, being a waitress, that I mean your income fluctuates depending on how much you're working, and how much you're getting tipped, and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? There's a lot of variables there. So you know you got to take all that kind of stuff into consideration. You can't just be light and just go through life and be like, oh, okay, I'll meet somebody, we'll fall in love, and love will buy us all. You know what I mean? Fuck that, dude. Get the fuck out of here with that. You know what I mean? Life is not the fucking Notebook or you know, a Titanic. You know what I mean? Get the fuck out of here with that. You know what I mean? We got to be realistic. And quite frankly, you got to be realistic about the love piece too, right? Because if you guys get married, right? Let's say she got married to this dude after 9 years, right? And you know, God bless them. I hope everything works out. But they got married, and they start wanting to build something with each other, right? Build a family, buy a house, do all that sort of thing, right? The American dream, right? Then they start running into into roadblocks. You know what I mean? And let's face it, guys. I'm gonna be real with you, because I was like this. Okay, at 20 something, you guys don't know shit. I'm telling you right now. Okay, so I was very responsible for my 20s, and I was thinking about the future ahead, right? And I knew during my 20s I was not ready for nothing. Um, I was still trying to figure it out. So let's be realistic. You guys don't know shit right now, right? Um, so just enjoy it. Just go out and figure it out, right? Get your degree, or go to trade school, or whatever the case may be. Because I got one boy that's a nurse. I got another one that's still trying to figure it out, but he's 20. You know what I mean? And that's okay. You know, he thought he wanted to be a fireman, but he doesn't want to do that. And I'm 100% on board with that. That's what it's all good. You know what I mean? Um, so he's got to figure that out for himself. So we all have to figure it out, right? And if you can't even take care of yourself, then you sure as hell can't take care of someone else, right? There's an emotional piece of that, and then there's a financial piece, right? And the majority of guys out there, and yeah, I'm talking to you, motherfuckers, you guys don't know what you don't even know yet, right? So how the fuck are you gonna take care of a woman? There's no way, man. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm 52, man, and I'm still 25 in my head. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to fucking figure it out. You know, I mean, I've already been there, done that. Right? Got the fucking t-shirt and it didn't work out. So now I'm just like, ah, fuck it, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that I can't do it. It's just that I don't want to. It's a choice by what I've been through in life, right? So I just don't really want to do it. But at 20, you guys don't even know. You guys don't have enough life experience to know what you need to do or what you don't need to do. You know what I mean? So you should be out there dating, you should be out there figuring it out. What options are out there? What do I like in a woman? What do, you know what I mean? And in parallel with that, you should be, okay, what do I want to do when I grow up, right? I always wanted to be an engineer. I knew that, so now I'm an engineer. You know what I mean? And I'm doing very well, right? So you got to figure that out first. You know what I mean? And then get your dating game up, get your, do all that sort of thing. And I got all that. I got all that figured out. I'm figuring out the dating landscape now versus, 7, 8 years ago, right? It's very, very different. But, you know, I'm figuring it out. But, if I do find someone, I'm not going to have kids. So that's a no-go. You know what I mean? If I do meet somebody that, wants children, that's probably going to kill the relationship, which I'm okay with. It is what it is, right? But because it doesn't make sense for me at this time. I'm gonna be 70 by the time they graduate high school. Fuck that. I want to retire. You know what I mean? Like, I want to enjoy my life. I want to travel. I want to do shit like that, man. Fuck that. Um, and then so many women my age have so much baggage. You know what I mean? So I'm not dealing with that. Um, so what are my options? Very, very limited, right? But if you're in your 20s, figure it out. Figure it out first. Work on you. You know what I mean? Get in the gym, take care of yourself, get in good shape. Um, do that sort of thing. Figure out your finances, your life. Don't be in debt, that sort of thing. Figure all that stuff out first, and then you can sustain a relationship. You know what I mean? Get your mind right. Um, and I think women need to do that too. You know what I mean? I can't speak to women, but I've talked to a lot of friends, and one of them being my ex, and the boy's mom, and she said, "Yeah, I probably would have figured it out more. I would have spent more time figuring it out." She was on a clock, you know. Um, and now we can have kids later on in life. Women can have them later on in life, So it shouldn't be that much of a it shouldn't be that much of a clock. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be that much of a factor. But sometimes it is. You know what I mean? But Bottom line is, man, with the economy the way it is, man, you got to make a lot of fucking money to be able to live in a nice area, to be able to buy a house. This young couple that my mom was talking to the other day, they bought a house in, way out, south of here. And dude, there's nothing out there. It's isolated. There's not a lot out there. So you have to come into where I live in this area to be able to do anything, have anything to do. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense, right? So you got to really work and get your game up in order to be able to sustain what life throws at you. Otherwise you're going to put additional pressure on the relationship, and then she's not going to see you as the man that you are. You know what I mean? Things change when you get married, man. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you can't sustain yourself, right, that's going to be amplified in the marriage. She's going to get sick of it, and then she's going to go out and look for something else, man. I'm telling you right now, I know this. I know this. I didn't live it because I was always the man that I wanted to be, right? Um, but honestly, man, you got to be realistic in this world today, and you got to get your mind right and your game right, and these women that are in such a fucking hurry, like with me, man, they see, single guy, decent looking, right? You know what I mean? And with the kind of life I live, man, I get stage 5 fucking clingers all the time. I mean, it's crazy once they get to know me. And, I just can't handle that, man. I just can't deal with it. It's just not my thing. I don't want to be in a relationship. I made that conscious choice, you know what I mean? Because unless she's bad, unless she's banging, unless, you know, all of the stars line up, you know what I mean? There's a lot of variables that got to line up. I got to see her in different scenarios. I got to see what kind of person she is. She's got to be very outgoing. She's got to be, in the gym, hitting it, you know, at least doing her work. I mean, I don't care if she's, a little bit overweight, as long as she's doing her thing in the gym. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like I would take a hard 6 over a 10 with a shitty personality, like a hard 6 with a cool personality, that somebody I could chill with, that has a lot of shit going on, versus a 10 that's just, wanting to glom on to something, right? You know what I mean? And just looks good. So what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of variables there, right? And, you know, I'm not going to just jump into a relationship because, she touched my pee-pee. You know what I mean? Like, I don't do that. Um, you know, they got to be, they got to have their shit together, man, for real. And I just wanted to tell you about that situation. I was just like, dude, 9 years and he hasn't asked you to marry you. You know what I mean? Like, wow, yeah. I didn't know what to say to that, man. I was just like, I could be, I could say some asshole kind of thing, but I was like, hey, good luck with that. Hey, if things change, man, I'll be around. I just told her, and I said, it was nice meeting you. And I took off. Um, but she was the kind of person that I'm kind of looking for. You know what I mean? Somebody very organic. I'm not into tattoos, man. I've never been into tattoos. It's just not my thing. It just, like, when I was growing up, man, tattoos always had a bad stigma about them. You know what I mean? Especially on women, and that always stuck in my head. Um, and I've never met a sane girl with tattoos. I really haven't. You know what I mean? So those two factors kind of factor into my decision. You know what I mean? And she didn't have any that I could see. She was really, really nice, kind of southern, Southern Belle kind of thing. She had that Southern Belle kind of thing happening with a little bit of nerdy, you know what I mean, with her glasses and stuff. I don't know, man. She was just, you know, I had to roll up, you know. Um, so yeah, man, it's a trip. It's a trip out there. So good luck. So do it right, man. Do it right. Have your shit together before you hook up with a woman and think that you can even take care of her. But stay in your frame too. It's very important. All right, guys. Just wanted to shout this one out to you. Hope you're doing well. Talk to you soon.